first author that we're going to talk to is Kristy Woodson Harvey, and she's written many books, but her latest is called Feels Like Falling, and she's going to be our first speaker. Kristy Woodson Harvey is the best-selling author of Dear Carolina, Lies and Other Acts of Love, Slightly South of Simple, The Secret to Southern Charm, and The Southern Side of Paradise. Kristy is the winner of the Lucy Bramlett Patterson Award for Excellence in Creative Writing. She was a finalist for the Southern Book Prize, and her work has been optioned for film. She also blogs with her mom, Beth Woodson, on Design Chic, which is her Instagram account, about how creating a beautiful home can be the catalyst for creating a beautiful life. She is a Phi Beta Kappa Summa Cum Laude graduate, which means she did really, really well in school at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and that was in a school of journalism. And then she also has a master's in English from East Carolina University with a concentration in multicultural and transnational literature. And she's a member of the Tall Poppy Writers Group, which has a lot of fantastic writers who have been on the podcast. And she's a frequent speaker at all sorts of events, and she lives in North Carolina with her husband and her 7-year-old son, and her latest book is Feels Like Falling, and that's what we're going to talk to Kristy Woodson Harvey about today. So, sorry for the long bio, but how impressive is she, right? Aren't you glad I read it? I hope so. I certainly do. Hi!
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, I have to let y'all know right off the bat, I am sort of on the Camille train. I live on the in North Carolina, like you just said. We're having a major thunderstorm, so if you hear anything crazy, I tried to pick, we walked around the house and we're like, okay, what's quiet? So hopefully it won't be loud, and it's kind of dying down, but if you hear something crazy, that's probably what it is.
Okay. It's also a huge storm where I am, so we'll see what happens, Yeah. What is up? I mean, it's bad enough that it's a Monday morning in quarantine. Now we have to have like thunderstorms and
right. The only thing saving us is the good weather. I mean, what are we going to do?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know. Better Monday than Sunday. Who knows? Whatever. Okay. I guess it's nice. We had 100%. A nice day yesterday.
Yes. Yesterday was gorgeous. So this is kind of the payback, I guess.
And I feel like it's been 100 years since I met you last summer at Author's Night out in for the East Hampton Library. That was so nice. And you were like so radiant and like, oh my gosh, it was so nice to meet you. So
well, that's nice. Well, it was so fun. I was so excited to meet you. I was like fangirling really hard. You probably remember, but it was probably embarrassing. So sorry. But that was such a fun night, and I'm going back again. So I'm really excited to be there next August. So hopefully I'll see you again.
I hope that events are still going on in August. Do you think
I do too. I actually, I usually go on like a 6-week book tour when I have a new book come out. And this year, for some reason, some really smart person said, let's split it and we'll do 4 weeks in like April and May and then 2 weeks in August. So I'm hoping that we can at least salvage that August part. I mean, if we can't, we can't. But I love going on book tour. Like, it's just fun to get to go meet readers and cool people like you. So.
Well, I feel terrible for all you guys who can't go on your book tours. I mean, it's so sad to get to the finish line of a big project and not be able to sort of celebrate it and make sure it gets into the right hands. So
it's going to be so interesting though to just like do something completely different and like do things like this and see what happens. I mean, I feel the worst, I think, for people who are, this is their first book and they've been really, just waiting to do this book tour. I feel terribly for them because that is so exciting. It's kind of like the culmination of all that hard work that you've done in all those years. And so that is really sad for them, and hopefully they'll be able to move theirs. But I'm just so grateful they're not moving my book release date because I was afraid that was going to happen, or it was going to have to happen because we weren't going to, have books. But, putting out a book a year, I started thinking about that logistically. And I was like, well, first of all, this is not really a book that you want to come out in November. That's not an ideal time for the beach cover. But I started thinking, I was like, oh my gosh, well, if it comes out in November, we're already going to be starting promotion for Under the Southern Sky, which is my 2021 book. So people are going to be like, enough. We've had enough of you.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, that's like a pretty great problem to have, is that you're creating so much good content that you can't even figure out how and when to promote it all, right?
That's good. It's great.
So have you already written? So is that your schedule? 1 book a year every summer? That's just like,
I mean, I'm not saying I'm married to that for the rest of my life or anything, but it's worked for me really well. Like we're in the groove. That's how it's going. I kind of have my bearings with that situation a little bit. And actually it was, oh my gosh, I'm super grateful that I had a book to be working on because my edits were due like 2 or 3 days ago on Under the Southern Sky. And so it just gave me something. I was like, it's normal. I'm working. I just have to focus on the book. I can't think about, all the craziness going on and focus on, I mean, of course you're thinking about it and feeling terribly about it, but it gave me something to kind of an outlet. So I wasn't like sitting there watching the news 12 hours a day and like all the terrible things going on. I was in my little writing cave for at least a few hours a day, kind of focusing. So.
And what do you do? What are you going to do now that you've been freed from the cave?
Well, I mean, so the new book comes out April 28th, and we are sort of scrambling to get this virtual tour put together because, it takes like 9 months to put these tours together. And so then to kind of turn around and put together, some semblance of a virtual tour, we will be working nonstop on that. And we didn't want to do it too early because, like I said, we didn't know if we were going to have books. So I have heard now that the books have shipped to the distributors. So, and at the very least, I mean, I know you feel this way, and so do I. I'm a huge proponent of independent bookstores. I love them. They are so amazing. And, I hope that this is a time when people will, choose to support them and, we're bored, we're at home, go buy a book.
Yeah.
Pick it up at the curbside, have them deliver it to your house. I mean, they're getting really creative. It's impressive.
That's true. Yeah. I went on this walk yesterday, which is the first time I've like walked into the town nearby. It was like out of desperation. Anyway, there was one little store that I never really go into, but there was a sign on the door and it says, if you really need a cozy sweater, call this number and we'll drop one off for you. And I was like, I could use another cozy sweater. I've worn this one like 100 times. I know. So I think I might have to call. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah. We'll see what turns up. Anyway, back to you and your book and all of this greatness. So can you hold it up again and can you explain the plot and what it's about? Because the plot is so great for this book and it sounds so good. Yeah.
Thank you. So Feels Like Falling is a book about Gray and Diana, who are two women from very different worlds who sort of come together to form this like odd couple friendship. They meet on a day when they're both having a really, really bad day. Those days where it's just like nothing's going right. And so Gray is at a point in her life where she could really use some good karma. And Diana's at a point in her life where she could really use some good luck. And instead, Gray inadvertently gets Diana fired from her job. So it sort of thrusts these two women together that on the surface seem to have nothing in common. Sorry, that was a thunderstorm shutter blow.
Oh my gosh.
But in reality, they have so much in common. They've both lost their mothers, albeit in very different ways. They're both dealing with the loss of a partner, although, again, in different ways. And they're both sort of at a crossroads in their career, which is, a major situation in both of their lives. And neither of them know it, but they're both about to embark on a really great love story, too. So that's always one of my favorite parts. But there are a lot of, issues that come up in this book. There are a lot of things that these women are dealing with that real women are dealing with. But I think it's my funniest book. I hope. I tried to make it. I felt like when I was really going through the process of writing this, it was, we were out of our house from Hurricane Florence, and I was like, I just need some like comic relief in my life. And so I sort of feel like it was like this omen of, okay, we're also going to really be needing some comic relief in our life when this book comes out. So I'm happy for that because I do think it's a funny book. I think people can really escape into this book. It's set in the fictional town of Cape Carolina, which is based on Morehead City, which is near where I live. So you get to see that, it's one of those fun, beachy locales. And these women are just great. They sort of worm their way into my heart, and I hope that they will for readers too.
That's so great. So you wrote it during a hurricane, and now it's coming out during a pandemic. I mean, what are the odds?
Am I bad luck? What's going on? I know. It was so strange. But actually, the really funny thing about this book that makes it sort of unusual and different from my other books is that I wrote it in 2016, and it's actually coming out now. So I wrote this book. I got contracted for the Peachtree Bluff series, so I wrote all 3 of those books. They came out, and then I spent 8 or 9 months completely tearing Feels Like Falling apart and putting it back together. It was such a cool exercise because I had changed so much in 4 years. The world had changed so much in 4 years. And the way that I felt about these women and what they would be doing and how they would be handling these situations in their lives had completely changed. So that was so interesting for me. I try not to go back and read my earlier books just because it kind of makes you cringe a little, I feel like, because you hope that you've grown from book to book and you're like, oh, why did I say that? Or why did that character say that? Or why did they do that? So it was sort of this great opportunity to get to like go back and totally rewrite this book for where we are today. So I think it's good timing. Like, I really do. I feel like it all worked out the way it was supposed to. And I'm glad this book is coming out now and that it didn't come out in 2016 when I read it.
Wow. And what about your next book, the one you were just talking about having finished?
Okay. Okay, so Under the Southern Sky comes out 2021. We don't have a pub date yet. I think April-ish. But I'm really excited about this book. It's actually a book that I've been thinking about for like 5 or 6 years. And I don't know, I haven't really talked about it much, so I don't even really know how to tell you about it. But essentially, the protagonist of the story is a man. This is my first male protagonist. I have 4 female protagonists also. But Parker is kind of the center of this book, and his wife has passed away 3 years earlier. And when the book is sort of opening, a childhood friend of his, who is also a protagonist of this book, has sort of accidentally discovered that these embryos that he's frozen with his dead wife are about to be destroyed because they haven't been able to get in touch with him. So it sort of like bursts the story wide open about, you know, what do? You have this piece of this person who's gone, and, you know, what's the next right step? So there are, of course, a lot of other storylines going on, but that's the main one.
Ooh, wow. Well, that sounds really good. Do you just have like is it hard for you to come up with ideas, or do you just have a ton, or do you keep a notebook, or like what's your process like?
So I have a ton. I keep separate Word documents on my computer, and just whenever I have something kind of interesting that comes up, I'll like pop it in a Word document. But usually I don't know where a story's going to go. And like even with this one, I mean, a friend came to me and said, you know, I have these embryos. What am I supposed to do with them now? And I just sort of jotted that down, but I didn't know what the story was until I actually sat down and started writing and thought, okay, who are these characters? What are they like? What's happening to them? And even in Feels Like Falling, I mean, I remember finishing this story, and I was, my husband was at a work conference, and I had gone with him so I could just finish this book and be done. And I met him downstairs for dinner, and I was like, that ended the exact opposite way that I thought it was going to. And he was like, you're the one writing it. What do you mean? But it is just so cool how the characters, they just take over the story and they really come to life. And I'm a person, I like to read character-driven stories and I like to write character-driven stories. So I do think that's a big part of that the plot is important, but it's not usually what's on, you know, the forefront of my mind. But then narrowing it down and trying to figure out, okay, what is capturing me next? Like, what is it that won't let me go, that won't let me, you know, sleep at night because I'm so excited about writing it. And that's usually where I go next. And a lot of times I end up sticking a couple stories together at some point, and one idea, you know, isn't the best one, and so that kind of combines with another one, and then it's the right thing. So it's a really interesting process.
Wow. Having written all of these books, do you have any advice for aspiring authors? I feel like you've turned this into like a system and you have it down.
Yeah, and I do think that is, when I tell authors, you know, new authors or aspiring authors, like, it's a business and you have to treat it as such. And I feel like the creative part of it is what like lights us up and keeps us coming back to it. But the business part of it is what allows us to actually be able to do this as a career. And so I am, you know, very systematic about, you know, writing my 2,000 words a day. It's the first thing that happens, because if I don't have a new book to put out, I don't have a job anymore. So that's sort of the most important thing for me. And I'm not saying that everyone has to do that. I mean, it's, you know, whatever schedule works for you. But I think, you know, treating it like, you know, something real that, you know, is really going to happen. And you are the queen of talking about this, but, you know, finding the time is so difficult. And people tell me all the time, I don't have time, I don't have time, I don't have time. And I'm like, I get it. Like, I wrote Dear Carolina. I had a 2-week-old baby when I got the idea for that book, and I would sit in my closet at night while I was breastfeeding and like jot down Dear Carolina. Like, that's how Dear Carolina came to life. So there was no like, oh, I went on this 6-week retreat to Italy and wrote this beautiful, no, like, oh my gosh, no, like, books are being written in the midst of dirty diapers and, you know, homeschooling now. So I think it's just like everything else. And we just got to get it done, right?
You got it. Aw. Well, Kristy, thank you so much for coming on. And
Thank
it was so
you.
nice to finally get to chat with you. And I
Yeah.
hope the storm there passes. And thanks for giving
You
us
too.
great things to look forward to reading.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Oh, it was great chatting.